does this boundary exist for my child's good or for my convenience? And if people are in those moments, at 1 o'clock in the morning when you're able to be really honest with yourself, you're probably going to say, yeah, it's mostly for me.
You're listening to the Connected Parenting Minute with Will and CarrieAnn Standfest. This podcast is a conversation about parenting using connection-first, trauma-informed principles. Because when you lead with connection, everyone feels seen, which is the foundation to a more peaceful home. This podcast reminds you that you don't have to be a perfect parent, but we can all get a little better, one connected parenting minute at a time.
Hello, and welcome back to Connected Parenting. My name is Will Standfest, and I'm so happy you're joining us this evening. With me, as always, is the lovely CarrieAnn Standfest.
Hey, everybody. It's so fun to be back in the studio recording.
It is. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's been a little bit, but we're good. Today, we have a guest with us.
We do, and it's very exciting.
It is very exciting because all the way from Texas is our good friend, Ryan North.
Hello, everybody.
So, Ryan, why don't you tell them a little bit about what you do? And then, CarrieAnn, you can jump us into the topic.
All right.
Okay, so I'll give the 30-second elevator pitch because of the time constraints of recorded episodes. My wife and I have 6 kids. We were foster parents for 10 years. 4 of those 6 kids adopted from the child welfare system in Texas. We got to the place where we had received enough help that we felt like we had learned enough that we could start helping. And then through a series of things, we have a company called One Big Happy Home. We work with parents, schools, churches, child placing agencies. And in the midst of all of that, we also have the Empowered Parent podcast that we do with our friend Chris Turner. And I think we're right at 200 episodes now. It should be more for as long as we've been doing it. But you guys are lucky because you are married and you just come upstairs to the studio you made here. I've got to get people into a building.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I haven't eaten yet. I've literally had, I haven't eaten yet as a reason we can't record. I'm like, just eat on the air. So, so right at 200 episodes, about 750,000 downloads now. So it's been a lot of fun. Got to meet a lot of nice people that way. And it's the thing I can point to that goes, maybe we are helping.
Right.
Because a lot of the rest of the stuff we do, like I don't know. Like I'm up here because I spoke at a conference. I came in, we spoke. And I might not know if what I said mattered at all to anybody there. Mm-hmm. But doing the podcast, because the podcast is like an audio book that you get a new chapter every week, every 2 weeks, whatever your release schedule is. So I love them. I love getting to do that because I get to hear our thoughts fresh. And so now the book has 200 chapters.
Yeah. No, and that's great because you have helped a lot of parents. I know that there's a lot of people who have been like, it clicked when you said it.
Yeah. Yeah. So we were talking about that earlier with you guys. I'd said something to one of your kids and Will said, yeah, I've told him that. I'm like, yeah, he's dead. He doesn't listen to you. And so a lot of times, even with adults, we do that too. We don't tend to listen to the people closest to us. Mm-hmm. But if you put a microphone in front of somebody, then all of a sudden you assign a level of expertise in your mind. And all of a sudden now you know way more than the person who just told me the exact same thing. So I think it's a valuable tool.
No, absolutely. And I think that is why we're so privileged to have you on the podcast today. Well, we'll
see if you think that in 30 minutes.
Oh, I know we will. I know we will. We have some great conversations.
We do.
So today we're going to talk a little bit about boundaries.
Oh,
and boundaries with kids, particularly. That's been a topic of some of our conversation over the last several days when you've been here.
Which is really strange considering we have 7 of the 9 children in our house are either teenagers or 20-somethings. And it's weird. Did you know that teenagers don't like boundaries?
Yeah, right?
They're not their favorites.
No?
Hold on. Can you say that again? Because I want to... No, yeah. Teenagers, really. I mean, we were talking about this a little earlier, right? It's why rock music and pop music and all commercial music is essentially written for 16 or 17-year-olds. Mm-hmm. Right? So like it's meant to connect emotionally. It's why Taylor Swift, like you said, writes breakup songs. It's why every girl in a Rolling Stones song in the 60s was 17 years old. It's why the Beatles sang she was just 17. Mm-hmm. And you know what I mean. I won't sing. I'll spare your listeners.
So boundaries. What did you want to...
Well, so there's 2 aspects of boundaries I wanted to really bring up. And the first one being why boundaries are important, because that's hard because we kind of see it as family rules, right? But really, I've come to think of them as boundaries because what are boundaries there for? And they're really there for protection over time. But parents tend to see those as rules that, well, you have to follow. And so like why the importance of boundaries are there, but then also the aspect of why we need to be very careful in setting those boundaries with our teens, especially.
Sure.
So we can talk first about why are boundaries important for our kids?
Well, absolutely. Because if you think about boundaries, like even by redefining it from rules to boundaries, it almost frames it in a better mindset in my opinion. Because you think just in the physical world around you, they put boundaries. There's a boundary when you're viewing the Grand Canyon. They've got a physical barrier there to prevent you from going too far and falling off the cliff and hurting yourself. Right. And that is hopefully the heart behind the boundaries or the limits or the rules we're setting for our teenagers, is that we're trying to set a guardrail, a barrier to prevent them from going and doing things that will harm themselves. Because as much as they tell me they know everything,
and as much as they feel they know everything, because let me promise you, they do.
And to be fair to our kids, not to completely throw them under the bus, I thought I did too at 17.
Oh, yeah. No, and that's why I can say that with such confidence.
Yeah. So one of the things that we've started saying in our house to each other, not to the kids, but just to each other, to kind of remind ourselves that we are dealing with immature minds at 15, 16, 17, whatever, right? Is I actually said to my wife, she called me this morning about something that happened at the house yesterday. And I said, yeah, I mean, it's good that child A went to child B and sought counsel on the issue. But the problem with that, so I'm happy for the relationship, but the problem with that is that child B has no idea how the real world works. Right? And that's the problem, is the kids think they know how the real world works, but they have no idea how the real world works. So there's two things about boundaries that, there's a couple of things about boundaries. A couple means I'll say two or three. There's a couple of things about boundaries that really informed how I think about boundaries, because adults don't love boundaries either. But as an adult who hopefully has some level of maturity and wisdom, you understand that they're necessary.
Yeah.
Where kids don't think they're necessary, because kids only think that boundaries exist to ruin my fun.
Yes.
So I'll give an example. Let's pretend, because we haven't done this, but let's pretend that my wife and I, to celebrate our 25th wedding anniversary, is coming up here in 18 months. We decide to spend 4 days in the wine country of Northern California.
Ooh, that sounds lovely.
Sounds lovely. And so we're driving, we rent a car. And I'm like, man, we'll go full California, convertible.
Nice.
And we're driving up the Pacific Coast Highway, sweeping like a piece of spaghetti that was thrown on the side of the mountain. To the right, we see California. To the left, we see the Pacific Ocean crashing against the mountains. And we're just loving it. We're going full California. I got the Beach Boys on the radio. I got my Spotify's on the best of the Beach Boys. And Kayla, she had her hair done. She had a pedicure. She did all the things. And then she is, the sun's setting in the distance. And so she's got her feet up on the dash. She's doing the I'm living my best life picture with the scenery in the background and your feet in the foreground that everybody puts on Facebook.
Love it.
And she's posting these pictures. I got my arm out the window, my hand on her leg, and we're just living our best life. And then I see a sign that says guardrail damage ahead. I'm 200 feet above the Pacific Ocean. I haven't thought about the guardrails, but the moment that I realize that the guardrails are gone, I don't go, we should drive faster. What I do is I put both of my hands on the wheel. I tune out the music completely. And instead of, and hey, sweetie, I'm so glad we're out here celebrating our marriage, quickly becomes, woman, take your feet off the dash. Because in that moment, I realized that the boundary exists for my protection, not for my harm. Kids don't ever get there mentally.
Yeah.
The boundary only exists to ruin their fun. And so if I can remember about my children, then I engage them slightly differently on the boundary rather than getting mad that they violated the boundary. And as Will said, who amongst us at 17 didn't violate a boundary? I was trying to think of a clever way to say that, but we pushed right through them.
We did, absolutely. And that's a framing that I think is helpful to remember, especially in the foster and adoptive world, where a lot of us tend to catastrophize our kiddos' behaviors, or, oh my gosh, they snuck a phone. Oh my gosh, they want to sneak out at night. They don't want to go to bed on time. They're going to become a career criminal. We project these things out because of the fears and because of what we're afraid could happen or develop in their future. Whereas if we put ourselves back in that 17-year-old self, if we grew up in a neurotypical home, we were still in that same situation. And I think it's very easy for us as parents to forget where we were when we were that age and how much we did push back and how much we didn't like those boundaries.
Well, and I was thinking too, as you were talking, Ryan, I think some of our experiences dictate so much how we interpret the boundaries put around us. For instance, I think I've told this story before, but when I was like 4 years old, I went down the street to play with one of my friends and I didn't tell my mom where I was going.
Yeah.
I remember so vividly the feeling of never wanting my mom to like be that upset at me again for disappearing, that stuck with me. And so that was like a thing that obviously my mom wanted me to learn, but because of that experience, it was so deeply ingrained in me that I was never going to do that again, which I haven't much to some of my families. Like, okay, just leave the house already. Like, no, I want you to understand where I'm going and when I'll be back. But those experiences really inform how we
you transfer that into your kids, right? Because you realize one day, oh no, I'm my mother in this story.
Yeah, well,
and that's good or bad about your mom. That's just merely a recognition that over time you change position in the story. And the thing that was hard for me to admit was that, and I actually asked my 22-year-old son about this. I said, am I as dumb at 22 as I was at 17? Meaning his age. And he laughed and he said, no, you're not, right? And so that's back to they don't know how the real world works because they think that our homes are restrictive environments. The problem with thinking of it as a restrictive environment is that it betrays a lack of understanding that boundaries exist for your protection, not your harm.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure somebody smarter than me is going to have to tell me whether the kids even have the cognitive capacity to understand that. I don't know the answer to that, but they tend to think that the boundaries are restrictive. We talked about this the other night about how when you ask a teenager what does it mean to be independent? What does it mean to be an adult? We use that word. What does it mean to be an adult? Some version of nobody tells me what to do. Right. And so, that's a very immature understanding of what it means to be an adult. But if that's an immature understanding of what it means to be an adult, then we have to, in the same moment, agree that is a completely understanding of what a completely legitimate understanding that a teenager has of what it means to be an adult.
Right.
And so it does not mean that people don't tell you what to do. It means that they exist for your protection. And they've always existed, right? You can go back to the book of Job. It's one of my favorite ones, Job 38. So the devil goes to God, your boy Job only serves you because you protect him. God says, you're wrong. I won't protect him. You can't kill him though. And so a lot of bad things, and if you're not familiar with the story, you read the book of Job. But a lot of bad things happen to Job, and his wife and his friends just curse God and die. And he refuses to do it, but then he starts grumbling. And in Job 38, it says, the Lord answers Job out of the whirlwind. And he says to him, the first question he asks is, he says, who is this who darkens my counsel with words that are without wisdom? If you ever hear the clear, audible voice of God say that to you, you better be very afraid.
Right?
The problem, however, is that on the daily, the Lord could say that to Ryan North. Who is this who darkens my counsel with words without wisdom? And then God asks him some questions. And all the first questions are, hey, when I set the boundaries of the world, where were you, smarty pants? Did I seek your advice on what to tell the ocean you can come this far but no further? And we don't tend to think about the physical world exists with boundaries for our protection, right? The reason that the sea only comes so far on a high tide is to protect the people on the land. Because when you have a tsunami and the sea violates that boundary, properties damage, people die.
Yeah, it's devastating.
It's devastating. But we don't seem to connect the physical boundaries of the universe with relational boundaries because we're awesome and that doesn't apply to us. And I'm not speaking about teenagers. I'm speaking about me now.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know me. The speed limit says 55. I do 80. Right? Because I've got skills. I could have been a racing car driver if my life just turned out differently. One or two. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And so then I have to realize, well, if I'm not great at obeying the boundaries, then I kind of have to take a breath and realize that the reason the child not abiding by the boundary, it's not because they're like, oh, I'm just getting so frustrated because you don't see that this is for your good. Then I have to concede, I'm just getting really frustrated because you're not respecting my boundary. And then I take it personally, and that's when it all goes off the hook. So you have to sort of train yourself to think differently about it.
Right.
We are on the road again. We're teaching at 2 conferences this fall, CAFO 2025 and the Replanted Conference. If you live in the Houston area, check us out at CAFO Summit, October 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. Go to cafo2025.org for more details. That's CAFO2025.org. Or if you live in the Chicago area, come see us at the Replanted Conference, October 23rd, 24th, and 25th. Go to replantedconference.org for more details. That's replantedconference.org. And if you want us to speak at your next event, reach out to us. Use info@connectedparentingminute.com, and we would love to work with you. And now back to the show.
So, I mean, that kind of brings us to the second point that I wanted to talk about was the aspect of what boundaries are we setting for our kids? And are we actually considering what the ramifications of those are? In the sense that, are we setting boundaries just because it's convenient for ourselves? Is it for our children's benefit?
The fact that this isn't being videoed and nobody could see me go, ooh, 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 and perk up in my chair. That's a great question. Like legitimately, that's a great question because the question is the boundary here for my child's benefit? Mm-hmm. For their good, let's define benefit as their good and their protection coupled together.
Yeah.
Is the boundary here for their benefit? Or is the boundary here because I have some bizarre view of how the world should work? Because them doing this thing is causing me to get upset, to waste my time. It's inconvenient for me. And so I think that's a really great question that I'm going to guess, if I'm just licking my finger and sticking it into the one people are not asking themselves.
Yeah.
And that is, does this boundary exist for my child's good or for my convenience?
Yeah.
And if people are in those moments, at 1 o'clock in the morning when you're able to be really honest with yourself, you're probably going to say, yeah, it's mostly for me.
Right? I mean, it really is. There's a lot of times where I've learned over the past several years that sometimes it's just for my convenience.
Yeah.
And I've had to go back and tell my kid, you know what, that I said that, or I said no to that. And it was really because it was just too much of an effort for me to say yes and an inconvenience. And so I'm going to change my answer on that because I think you making scrambled eggs, like for dinner, I know you were going to make a mess. It was going to be inconvenient for me. But now I'm going to turn around and say, you know what? I think that was wrong. I want you to be able to do that. And if it makes a mess, great, but you're going to learn in the process.
Yeah, messes can be cleaned up. And so I think you're right about that in that some boundaries, and I'm not going to, people say 98% off. No, I'm not going to take a swipe at that. But some boundaries that we've put up, that you've put up, that you've already admitted to. And so since 100% of the people in this conversation have admitted that they've put up boundaries for their own convenience, we should assume that most people are like that. Mm-hmm. But if it's for your convenience, it's hard to make the case that it's for the child's benefit.
Right.
Right. So one of the boundaries, the reason I'm up here in what in my mind is a very cold part of the country, but it's like almost 90 today. So I apologize for bringing the weather with me.
It's okay.
The reason I'm up here is I spoke on the developmental dangers of screens. Mm-hmm. And I would say, just without getting into it, this is one that you have to draw boundaries on. Mm-hmm. Because there's just too much research. And it's almost impossible to keep up with the research because in the last 5 days, I've read 2 different pieces on research on the damages to screens. Screens having your developing mind. And the other reason you need to have really great boundaries on screens when the kids are in your home is because when they leave your home to go off to college, to move out, whatever they're doing, at some point they're going to move out in their 20s. That still has a really negative effect on their minds till they were like 30. Mm-hmm. So all of your college, so now they're actually doing a lot of studies on the impacts of screens on college age kids. And we're finding that it's bad too. Mm-hmm. So that is one that you have to figure out how you can draw good, firm boundaries. The problem, as you and everybody listening to us knows, this is the one thing that kids absolutely do not want boundaries on.
For sure.
Right. I mean, we experienced freedom when we got our driver's licenses and dad or mom said, here's the keys to the car. Mm-hmm. The kids today experience freedom of that level when they get their first smartphone.
That's fascinating because that's one thing that we've, over the years, CarrieAnn and I have talked about this idea that none of our kids seem that excited about getting the driver's license. Mm-hmm. Nobody, they're like, yeah, they kind of want it. They kind of don't, they don't really push and whatever. I mean, one of our kids, he was 18 and then he just went to the DMV and took the test and got his license. But, 5 minutes after I was 16, I was like, on my parents, I got to get my license, got to get my license, got to get my license. But I think that's a fascinating insight that in our generation, when I was growing up, that was the moment I had some freedom in my house, is the day I could take the car and I could drive myself to work and I could go meet my buddies somewhere and all that. And for kids right now, the moment they get that electronic screen where they can go on the internet, supervised or not, or whatever, they all of a sudden feel like the world has opened up to them because that's what their world is.
It has, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So that kind of ties into the point that was being made earlier about what a young person thinks it means to be an adult.
Mm-hmm.
So at 16, you just said it, you're like, what do you want for your birthday? To go down to the DMV, right? I mean, that was what everybody did. And so what you did in that moment, you said, okay, now I can have the keys and I can meet my buddies. I can do what I want to, right? When you had the keys and you drove off down the street, at that moment, your mom didn't know what you were doing and she couldn't tell you what to do.
Yeah.
Well, that same mentality now exists because now you can be making dinner. Your kids can be at the kitchen table and they're doing things that you don't know what they're doing. And they're experiencing the same freedom while being 10 feet away from you. Yeah. Which is why, right, there's studies on this now. It's why there's an enormous decline in young people getting driver's licenses at 16 because it's not a goal. It's not freedom because they've already experienced that kind of independence. While simultaneously they all have Uber accounts. And I'm like, I can't imagine not wanting to drive.
Right.
Well, this morning, one of your sons said, hey, can you give me a ride to work? And as well, I was like, no, let me do it. I just because I like driving.
Right.
Yeah. So, but kids said, like, whatever, I'll be on Instagram.
Right. Well, right. And I mean, just to kind of wrap it back around to the point, we have to really look at boundaries and I mean, you could even use rules as an example because we talked about rules and boundaries are very similar, but boundaries are more along the lines of, is it for the protection of our kids? We need to really consider what is actually good for our kids and what is, like you said, for our convenience. And I think in analyzing that, we can give our kids more freedoms in different areas and hence be more connected with our kids. Yes. Because they see that we're on their side. We're not making petty requests or things. Because I can think of things when I was a kid. I was like, that is so dumb. Why did my parents say that? And it was for their convenience, but I still had to like respect that and follow that because I was under their house. I was, a minor, all that stuff. But it made me frustrated with them because I didn't feel like they were flexible in the things that were important to me.
Yeah. CarrieAnn, I honestly wish that there was another hour on the clock just to respond to what you said. So I'll try to work fast.
Okay. Very good.
No, I think that we don't think about things, on average, adults don't think about things the way you just said. Mm-hmm. Right. And so we don't bifurcate it. So this is just a rule of the house, right? So we clean the kitchen after dinner. That's not necessarily for now I talk myself out of my own point. I was going to say that's not necessarily for my child's good. But it does develop good habits and discipline in them. So it is for their good, right? Yeah. So we have rules of the house that maybe for their development may just be because we want to live in an ordered environment. Mm-hmm. But then we have to do the things that are for their development. And you think, well, my parents were inflexible. Well, the problem is we become inflexible because we don't give on other things. Because like you said, can I give on something else? And the answer is, yeah, not only can you, but you should. Because what happens is there's 5 rules and then we add 5 more rules. And now we have 10 rules where we could have added 5 more rules, but realized out of those 5 rules, we really don't need 3 of them because I have a 14-year-old now, not a 4-year-old. And so the same rules don't apply to 14-year-olds as apply to 4-year-olds. And so you can be flexible, but people don't do that. They just think that, well, if there were 10 commandments in the Old Testament, surely 100 commandments are better in my house.
Right. I think that's a really good point though, too. What you said there is that I know that I'm guilty of this a lot where I look at my kids as younger than they actually are.
That's true.
And I forget that our son is now 14 and he doesn't need the same rules that he had at 10, and that's a really easy thing to forget and to not allow appropriate boundary expansion for giving them a little bit more freedom and making them feel like they do have some more things going on because as evidenced by one of our children kind of struggling with boundaries recently, one of the things that he said was, I feel like you're so inflexible. I feel like you don't understand you don't listen to me or you don't change. And I think that really hits the core of what's going on there. If we can find a way to help him feel more heard, make his voice feel valued, and figure out where can we flex on these boundaries in a way that is meaningful to him and still hold the line on something that we feel is really damaging.
Right.
Like that's the place where hopefully connection and appropriate boundaries can be built.
I like that you added the word hopefully.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's all you do is you hope you're doing the right thing. You hope that it'll work. You hope that it'll benefit them. But you have to be real about that, because what happens is our expectation is, well, I drew a line. I expect you to not cross that line. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, that's an expectation that is going to leave you very disappointed. And what's going to happen is that they're going to cross that line. And then the parent processes it not like, okay, they violated a boundary in our home. We went, they disrespected me. They don't honor me. We say things like, I'm tired of you giving me the middle finger. And he's like, I didn't give you the middle finger. You did when you didn't obey me. There's a song by Radiohead. I just want to throw this in here. I'm not a huge Radiohead fan because it's like the evolution of Pink Floyd. And so I don't love all of it. But this is a song by Radiohead called Just. Where is it just? I don't remember. But the lyrics go like this. You do it to yourself. It's true. And that's why it really hurts. Because you do it to yourself. Ooh. Just you. You do it to yourself. And so I don't even remember what the verse is about, because it's probably about unborn chicken voices in his head or whatever their weird lyrics are, right?
It is Radiohead.
But the chorus really sticks with me. Mm-hmm. Because if I'm honest, the source of the vast majority of Ryan North's problems is a guy named Ryan North.
Mm-hmm. Right?
And the source of the great majority of relational problems is a guy named Ryan North. Because every time the child violates the boundary, which is a whole other conversation, I get to decide how we engage that boundary violation.
Right.
And oftentimes parents, because I'm a parent, I'll just say, grab all parents in this. I walk into the room and there is a can of gasoline and a fire extinguisher. And I go, you know what the situation needs? Gasoline.
Right.
And we do it all the time.
We do. Yeah, we really do.
Oh my gosh. This is such a good conversation. And I think there's so many more things we could say on this topic, but I think that it's a really good start just to address the fact that there do need to be some boundaries, but we have to be really intentional with what those are.
Absolutely. Ryan, if they want to hear more from you, where can they find you?
So easiest way is just go onebighappyhome.com, because it links to the podcast and the socials and all that stuff, or on any of the socials, you're just at One Big Happy Home on all of them. So you can just find us that way. If you go to Instagram, my wife's in charge of our socials. And so on Instagram, she might post pictures of the kids, videos and stuff, pictures of her feet on the dash. I mean, all of it is up there on Instagram.
She's so good at that. And it's so fun to see your kiddos, because we love all of them.
Same here.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's pretty good about that. So it's kind of a confluence of company/mom channel.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. We appreciate each and every one of our listeners. And before we go, we just want to remind you,
you don't have to be a perfect parent,
but we can all get a little bit better, one connected parenting minute at a time.
Thanks for listening to my mom and dad's podcast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and hit the like button like 10 billion times. Yeah!
For more parenting tips or to connect with us, check out the Connected Parenting Minute on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. Or you can send us an email using connectedparentingminute@gmail.com.